here at the museum, we have relatively few artifacts from the Luftwaffe, other than a large model of a Me-109, the Horton model. This is something that we have that's actual concrete. This is real. This is the engine of a 262. It's a Messerschmitt first generation fighter plane. It's the first jet fighter to see combat. We have an original jet engine from it, this Jumo 004. The Jumo 004 series was the first in a long line of turbojet engines. And if you look at a modern jet, almost all of them are powered by this style of engine. The other style, centrifugal, that's the rounder engine that the British used initially. That really was an evolutionary dead end. This came out in 1942, and from 1942 to today, the Jumo is kind of the granddaddy of all the modern jet engines. Now the 262, this thing was such a fright. When it came out, it was 100 miles an hour faster than the fastest British fighter planes and the fastest American fighter planes. Immediately, it changed the whole battle space. All of a sudden, we didn't have total aerial supremacy anymore, because as long as these things were in the air, everything else in the sky was slower. Our standard P-51 Mustang of the year, that could do 440 miles an hour. You could push it a little bit further in a dive, but you're not going to get anywhere close to 500 miles an hour. These operated, that's their environment, above 500 miles per hour. Now this is an interesting example because while we've had this Jumo on display, we managed to catch the last few people with a direct connection to it. I had a couple local men, people that I knew for years. I had them come into the museum and actually autograph the engine itself. There's two signatures here. The one on the top is Mr. Hans Busch. Mr. Busch flew this thing in combat as a bomber pilot on the mission to drop the bridge at Remagen. That's a pretty famous mission. 75 jets attacked the bridge that day. Not one of them managed to score a hit, including Mr. Busch. Below him, the signature is for Jorg Chipianka. He was a very young Czechoslovakian man before the war started. The vagaries of war, he was impressed into the German Luftwaffe, and at the end of the war, he was flying this jet as a night fighter against Mosquito bombers coming over Berlin at night. He had an incredible career, and we could fill up whole books with it. The third signature on here is Mr. Brown. Roscoe Brown actually was a consistent visitor to our museum for years. He's a Tuskegee Airman, and he holds the distinction of being the only Tuskegee Airman to actually shoot down one of these jets in combat using that Mustang. So even though the majority of times that this interaction occurred, the Mustang would attempt to shoot down the 262, unless it was taking off or landing, there were just too many advantages. This thing typically could engage and disengage combat at will. That one time, Mr. Brown did an excellent job of outmaneuvering the 262, and he shot it down in clear air, kind of disproving the myth that we could only catch them taking off.